Anything can be a mallet, but a mallet is really only good at being itself. The mallet paradox. This week I'd like to present the answer to the mallet paradox, the stool of many faces, a functionally ambiguous household item posing as a simple stool, the many-faced stool. The mallet paradox. See, the harder you think about it, the more you realize that this mallet paradox is everywhere. A lot of things can be a chair, but a chair is really only good at being itself. So that got me thinking. There's so much specialization in specialist items and specialist tools. The best and the only make a lot of sense in a lot of places. I get it. But maybe this hyperfixation has left some merit and space to bring back a little bit of ambiguity, a little multi-functionality, a jack of all. You know what I mean? Will this be the best stool? No, probably not. Will this be the best showcat podium that's also a monitor stand, poop stoop, TV tray, and puppy bassinet that also happens to be a very classy stool? You can guess what I think, but I'm a little biased. I think you should really be the judge. You can even voice your opinion with your wallet. More details in a bit. If you happen to just be joining this totally not live broadcast, I'm Nick. I'm a furniture maker out of Portland, Oregon, and admittedly, I'm a little bit of a glutton for punishment. Some have gone so far as to call me a masochist, unless they stumbled across that private OnlyFans, the woodworking kind of masochist, not the sex kind of masochist, just to be clear. I enjoy long sunset walks with the hardwood section, and I fancy myself one of the few last in a dying breed. The last of the woodbenders. The form you've just seen me make is how we're going to bend the wood. And this video will cover the one way of bending that I've never actually tried. Kerf bending. Hang in there, I've got some tricks up my sleeve. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the ways of the wood benders, kerf bending involves making relief cuts in the plywood core. This should allow the panel to wrap around the form we just finished. It's by far the most accessible, easiest to make, and essentially takes all the structural properties out of the plywood and throws them out the window. Sounds like a perfect solution for a safe way to reach high places. I hope Grandma and that gosh darn hip of hers are up for a little adrenaline rush while she reaches for that denture cream. Just kidding. I've got a few ideas for ways to bring the structural back to this novice-friendly technique. I've spent the better part of my formative years of self-teaching myself this craft. Self-teaching myself. I've spent the better part of my formative years teaching myself this craft, masking my developing design skills with technicality and complexity. Wood nerd stuff. There's 3 stages to the craft, so far as I've understood them anyway. 1, what's this tool and how do I use it? Then the fork in the road at 2A, how do I make the most efficient use of this tool to produce the most things? Or to the left, 2B, or not to be, how do I master the use of this tool for this one thing? These are both usually challenged with how the hell do I also eat and live doing these things, hence the reason why woodworking is largely a hobby sport. Once sufficient time soaking in the baths, 1 and 2, till your fingers get all crinkly and uncomfortable, the next step in this addiction recovery comes in the form of design. The final level boss, the endless challenge. I've always had a lot of respect for the people who can say a lot with their designs with less. Too far with your reduction, and you lose the soul of the piece. But there's a careful balance and refinement and reduction of a concept to the simplest state that it still owns your inherent you. I'm an ADHD wildcard of a harebrained wood nerd and have not had the confidence to charge what I do for something simple. The logical side of my brain says it makes sense that for more money, one should receive more things. The application of the logical, however, has brought to my attention that thoughtful design is not only reserved for complex problems. My first draft of this design, for example, is June 25th, 2021, 3 years ago. 3 years thinking about how to solve one problem. There's so much more complexity to thoughtful simplicity, like poetry saying as much through your work in as few words as possible, takes just as much and a great deal of consideration as more complex designs. Or, I don't know, maybe I'm just overthinking things. But I digress. As I was saying, kerf cuts aren't inherently strong, and if you're following along, we've confined this weak-ass stool on its form in a latex prison. In such vacuum of outer space, I discovered that glue does not dry. I knew this, so I suppose I rediscovered that in such vacuum of outer space, regular liquid glue remains very much liquid glue. So, two birds with one stone, we can make it stronger and make it form to the form with a catalyzed Mortishner's brew of urea formaldehyde. This will dry in the vacuum of space and works double duty by adding a skin to the interior surface that will fortify the bendy bits. With the structural issues addressed, I can now turn my attention to the aesthetic, namely the ugly-ass edge of the plywood with the stupid weak-ass kerf showing. I'll be demonstrating this technique by first showing you some cinematic footage shot in 4K at 100 megabits per second of 10-bit raw sensor data of the back of my arm. I could create this edge banding with a few chunks of wood and flesh trim, but I'm thinking it might be sexier to give the illusion of a solid bent plank by embedding a bent border at either edge. To achieve this illusory magic trick of wood bending trickery, I'll first slice the veneers from a board, and using the same form as the core, I'll create a bent laminated section that can then be halved and embedded as an edge. Basically, this could be done in segments to hide the edge, but there would be seams at the segments, or the grain would be going a weird way compared to the top that we'll be putting on in a minute. So I've selected to do this the harder way because it'll keep continuous grain along the edge and make it look like this whole thing is bent from a solid board. You might be wondering why, then didn't I just make this whole thing from a solid piece of wood? A few reasons, because to achieve continuous grain, the thickness of this piece, I'd need to cut veneers out of a 3-inch thick board, which is hard to come by, and not everyone is comfortable bending wood the way I am comfortable bending wood. So this makes the first and most accessible of 3 techniques that I demonstrate in the comprehensive video course of this project, available for pre-order to those interested in the description below. As mentioned before, this is a tight bend. Did I mention that I like a tight curve? Right. So this special juice to soften the veneers is made from equal parts glycerin, water, Titebond 3, and fresh human milk. This concoction aims to soften the fibers just enough to not break when I attempt to bend them. I really wanted to make something that anyone could build. And what makes kerf bending a great choice for this is that you don't need a bag. Kerfs are just as easily clamped around the form as they are pressed. But given that I have a vacuum press, I'm using it. You can use clamps, you can use ratchet straps, or you can even ask your mom to sit on it. It all works. You ready for school? See, all materials have a breaking point. The fibrous bundles of mostly sclerenchyma cells give organization and nutrient transportation for a tree. The thick cell walls of these fibrous bundles are given such utility by the crystalline structure of cellulose. All attempts and tricks to manipulate the dried shape of the wood are simply aiming to rehydrate the cellulose in the walls of the cell enough to allow the crystalline mesh to conform to the shape we wish to achieve. Upon re-dehydration, the structure is mostly held in memory of the fibers as the cellulose dries and becomes rigid. Without complete removal of moisture, the residual elasticity of the cellulose structure is what we call springback. This ultimately temporary medium of wood we work has a breaking point, and that's dictated by cellulose. Cellulose doesn't act alone though, it's held together by a glue. This glue is called lignin, and unlike cellulose, lignin is insoluble in water, and the manipulation of this organic polymer is achieved with heat. The combination of the two, heat and moisture, being the reason why steam bending is such an effective choice for manipulating wood. Heat for the lignin, moisture for the cellulose. I find an instinctual need to challenge the tried and true. Tried and true left unchecked can become inapplicable or mundane. Even though I work from a small, 400 square foot space, I'm always trying to find an interesting perspective on things. From furniture to video, shots to life, it's all only interesting and applicable given perspective. The isolation of the craft gives me a lot of time to reflect, and I'm often surprised how many thoughts are challenged by perspective. For one, given perspective, the fact that my studio is 400 square feet might be received as a feat to achieve such work that I do, and to others, a seeming palace, endless space to achieve anything. In comparison to the 10 by 10 plot of concrete outside they call shop space. Perspective is a really powerful thing.
Here's another interesting perspective. The odds of winning the lottery are 1 in 292 million. That means we're all 292.2 million times more likely to die than win the lottery. I know, not a topic we usually like to discuss. Death, not the lottery part. But death is something we all have to face at some point. And I thought now, in the middle of a woodworking project, would be a great time. So listen up and let me tell you about today's sponsor, ETHOS. Whether it's you or someone you love, nobody wants to be a burden after they're gone. Lord knows we're a big enough pain in the ass to our loved ones while we're here. You shouldn't want to be a burden after you're gone. From the inevitable to the unthinkable, you need to deal with making sure those left behind are taken care of. The last thing the bereaved and the grieving should have to worry about is money. ETHOS wants to help, and they wanted me to share the following with you. Traditionally, life insurance is complex and time-consuming, but ETHOS streamlines this with an online-only application, eliminating medical exams or blood tests. And this approach allows for quick coverage, often in minutes, just by answering a few questions online about your health. ETHOS offers 3 main advantages: speed, ease, and affordability. Clients can quickly get a quote and apply online in minutes, often receiving coverage the same day without medical exams. Contrary to common misconception of life insurance being too expensive, ETHOS is cost-effective, often providing some of the lowest quotes on the market, comparable to the price of a dinner every month, making it a really accessible choice for life insurance. If you're interested in learning more about ETHOS, or you're interested in getting your free life insurance quote, see my link below. You can get your own personalized free quote today by clicking on my link in the description below. Thanks, ETHOS, for supporting this build, and now let's get back to it.
So we've got the core. The weak-ass kerfs are reinforced with an inner skin. We've veneered that skin with some pretty fancy walnut. And the illusion of the solid board is ready to apply to the core in order to hide the ugly-ass plywood. Half the assembly is now pressed, and this is where it all starts to come together. Everything shines under a little pressure. Rather than trying to get all those thin laminations exactly the same thickness as the plywood, I overshot the edge trimming thickness so that I can come through and flush trim everything exactly to the ugly-ass plywood core. And while I do that, I don't know about you, but all that plant science got me kinda hot and nerdy over here, so I'm gonna keep going. I've always loved the organization of plants, not only structurally and physically, but also the classification and evolution in that corner of life. The plant kingdom is first defined by their reproduction, seeds or no seeds. I'm guessing at least 2 of you were just thinking, boy, Nick, this nerdy stuff would sure be a lot easier to understand if there was some visual aid. So, girl, I got you. I made this diagram to follow along. You're welcome. To seed or not to seed, sexual or asexual reproduction. You can't make furniture out of ferns or moss, so we'll go ahead and skip that side and break down the sexual reproduction side of the kingdom, or as I like to call them, plants that f***. Of the plants that f***, there's 2 groups. Those who distribute their seed unprotected, naughty naughty, and those who use protection. The spray and pray method of conifers, aka gymnosperms, throw their seed to the wind as they dangle their piney cones in the breeze. These evergreen species make up most of the softwood varieties that we use in construction. This brings us to the conifers' less sexually active but more sexually responsible flowering sisters, the angiosperms. angiosperms produce a seed that is wrapped in a protective nut or fruit. They depend on attracting pollinators with their flowers to distribute that nut. Deciduous trees, or the kind that lose their leaves every year, so not evergreens, are differentiated from other fruiting and flowering angiosperms by the number of leaves they have when they sprout. Baby angiosperms with one leaf are known as monocotyledons, or monocots for short, and these make up the flowers, bushes, shrubs, and corn, just to name a few. Also, not great for furniture. And moving right along. Finally, there's the cream of the crop, the dicot. The prefix di, meaning two, as in the number of children Princess Diana left behind, have 2 leaves. I wonder if Princess Di knew about this week's sponsor, ETHOS. Anyway, these dicots have 2 leaves when they pop out of the ground. To summarize, angiosperms that sprout with 2 baby leaves are dicots, and this subsection of the plant kingdom make up almost all of our beloved hardwood species used in furniture making today. It's kind of crazy that all this variety and differentiation all speciated from a world that looked far different from the world we see today, once covered only in a sparse smattering of crazy-looking woody shrubs. Now, forgive me, I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but I'd imagine a certain percentage of you may not buy into this whole evolution thing. So I'd be remiss in neglecting to also present the other definitions. And again, apologies. Please feel free to correct any inaccuracies you catch in the comment section below. But if memory serves, the other prevailing theory on the origins of the wood we work goes something to the tune of trees are because this is how they've always been. Since Adam and Eve sat beneath that infamous deciduous fruit-bearing dicot, they were pulling double duty not only as sinners, but also as human pollinators, spreading the seeds not only in one another, but also for the distribution of the very first apple trees. Now you might notice that this theory reveals some rather interesting disparities compared to what we have unearthed in the fossil record. So why, then, would we have discovered physical evidence of shrub-like woody vegetation that appear in the record around 240 million years before the speciation of flowering plants that This doesn't really make sense, given that we're told Adam and Eve's apple-fruiting angiosperms were the first. Don't worry. There's a perfectly logical explanation for these intriguing shrub-like anomalies. In fact, it's surprisingly simple to explain. See, they're not actually predecessors of Adam and Eve's apple tree, but have actually been found to be fossilized clippings from Eve's massive prehistoric bush. And my parents don't think I'm getting any use out of my degree. In an attempt to round out my skills to a point where I feel comfortable instructing, I've targeted a few points that I feel I could improve on. First is deviating away from my comfort zone, which just happens to be really uncomfortable, complicated, hyper-custom work, and trying to flex my industrial design and simplicity muscles a little bit. As far as designs go, I'm actually pretty stoked with this one. It's easily done by most skill levels with limited tooling, and unlike my typical projects that usually require tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds to thousands of hours of work, this thoughtful little number is ripe and ready for a production run. If you've been interested in supporting my work but not interested in paying for months of my life, this may be the scarce opportunity to do so, as I've decided to produce a very small batch of these available for pre-sale below. I'm only planning to do 20 of these for a numbered series, so first come, first serve. Get them while they hot. If you're interested in furniture design or building this stool, check out the learning curve. In addition to the furniture design course that is already up, I have available this project for pre-sale now as a comprehensive video course with 3 techniques on how to build this, scaled templates, and detailed plans. Specifics can be found at the link below. Alright, the other skill that I think we can all stand to approve on is finishing. You want to charge the big bucks? It better look the big bucks. So I was stoked to try out a new 6-stage turbine spray system my friends at Apollo sent over. Under no obligation to say this, and without receiving any compensation, I'm actually pretty impressed so far. Build quality, atomization, and material output are all pretty outstanding. Obviously, haven't had quite enough time to give it a proper impression, but I'll definitely keep you up to speed on any insights as I put it through the paces on future projects. Nice work, Apollo. For this project, I'm putting down a base of platina shellac and top coating in a water-based 2 parts catalyzed polyacrylic. And in my endeavors to improve my finishing skills, I think I am going to dip a toe into some solvent-based finishes because something about water-based on walnut just does not quite tickle my baby grand piano on a luxury yacht vibe. You know? Get subscribed if you want to keep up with that or anything I'm doing. One last thing before we wrap things up on this project. For those of you who have made it this far, long out of stock and backed by popular demand, is everyone's favorite tee, the Made by Hand design in black. 100% of proceeds will be going to my wife's uterus as we attempt to craft a genetically superior child that has laser vision and a chance at living. For the custom kid, Made by Hand seemed a fitting design choice for the cause. Oh, and hey, thanks. Before you pass judgment, hear me out for a sec. While this may not be the greatest stool of all time, I think it might be a solid contender for the sickest tech deck mini vert ramp parkour training device for an athletic pet ferret, as well as a defecation station, TV tray, seat for your sex swing, and feet up after a long day ottoman, which also happens to be a very understated contemporary aid for the vertically challenged. So let me know what you think. Comment below with all the creative ways you could think to use this stool. I got a free t-shirt for the funniest and the most creative. Ready, go. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.